Hi there and welcome back. This is video 2 of the Heads Up for Healthier Brains video series. My name is Erica Rice and I'm an education coordinator at the Alzheimer's Society of Simcoe County. This week we're going to be talking about getting your brain and body in gear, so the exercising your brain and exercising your body. Before I get into exercise, we're going to talk first about some memory strategies. In the last video, we talked about the difference between normal aging and not normal aging. And one of the biggest things between the two are changes in memory. So even with normal aging, we start to see some memory changes. We have problems pulling memory back out again, that recall. When you're living with a disease like Alzheimer's disease, one of the earliest changes is memory, being able to get things to encode into our memory, get it to stick. And so memory strategies can be helpful both for people who are living with dementia, but also just for those of us who are aging healthily but are seeing some changes in memory. So the objective of the next few slides is to provide you with some practical information about some different memory strategies that you can quickly learn and apply to your everyday memory situations. First, we're going to talk about how memory works and the process of creating memory and retrieving memory. When we create a memory, we call it encoding. So first, the brain has to take the information from all of our senses, put it all together and record it so that it's a memory we can pull back out again to use later. With normal aging, there is an intermediate decline with encoding. So our brain is having more trouble getting the information to stick, more so than it did when we were younger. When we have a disease like Alzheimer's disease, though, this is where the big problems start to occur, because the hippocampus in the brain, that's the brain region that does this for us, creates memory. This is the brain region that is affected earliest with Alzheimer's disease. And so the brain is having real trouble encoding information. And if it doesn't get the information in there, it's like it didn't occur in the first place. So we see that big changes in short-term memory loss with Alzheimer's disease. But we are seeing some intermediate decline with normal aging. Then we have the ability for the brain to store information, and this doesn't really change with normal aging. It has the ability to store it, it's just trying to get it in there in the first place that we're starting to see some changes. Where we see substantial changes with normal aging is getting the information back out again. So even if we're able to get it to stick, the information is in there and the memory is stored, it's trying to pull that memory back out. So we see that substantial decline with aging. And we're going to go in the next few slides some strategies to help you get the information in, some encoding strategies and some strategies to get it back out again, retrieval strategies. So we talk about different strategies to help us encode information, and this is strategies to help make the information stick in the first place. And the biggest strategy here is to really focus. Learn how to focus your attention in the moment. We often get distracted by things that are going on around us, whether it's things in our environment like the TV and the radio, our cell phones, or it can be distracted by internal thoughts. We're thinking about other things that we need to do in the day, and we're not really paying attention to what's happening in the moment. And that makes it difficult for our brains to take the information and make it stick. It also tells our brain that this isn't really that important for me to remember. Because let's face it, our brain can't remember everything that happens to us in every moment. So if you're not paying attention, it's like, well, this isn't important information. I don't need to hang on to this. So if you want to create that memory, really learn how to focus your attention and be mindful in the moment. Making the information meaningful can also help to encode the information and make the memory stick. Relate it to you in some way. Whether it is you're learning somebody's name and you're able to connect it with another piece of information that helps you remember it later on. Creating acronyms can help us remember information. So there's different ways to do this. It also talks about using your senses. So really paying attention, again, like being mindful, really paying attention to what you're seeing and what you're hearing and smelling and tasting and so on in the moment. Also using more senses. So if you're creating a grocery shopping list, you can think about the items that you're needing to get at the store, but as soon as you write them down, you're using more senses and it helps to encode the information at a deeper level. There are other different strategies to help encode for things like if somebody tells you their name when you first meet them, repeating it back to them. that can help your brain encode the information. So they say, hello, my name is Erica. And you say, well, it's very nice to meet you, Erica. And you keep using that name over and over. So repetition can help encode information. Doing things like self-talk. So if you're trying to remember different steps of a thing, you're kind of talking it through either in your head, or if you're like me, you tend to talk out loud when you're working, trying to remember things. It's really what works best for you. But that repetition, using more senses, all of this helps to encode the information. So if you've got some encoding strategies, now we're looking at some retrieval strategies. So we talk about two different types of retrieval strategies. The first one is internal, and these are things that we do inside of our brain to help us remember things, mental activities that help us remember. These do take a lot of mental effort in order to use them well. So an example that I often use, again, when I'm struggling to remember somebody's name, and I know I'm not alone in this one, is I'll go through the alphabet until I hit on the letter that sparks the memory. It's that trigger that allows me to find the piece of information stored away and pull that name back out again. So that's an example of an internal memory strategy. Also things like acronyms, and we'll be going through a few acronyms in today's video. Those are internal memory strategies. So an acronym, or every letter stands for a different part of what you're trying to remember. So that's an internal memory strategy. External memory strategies are those things that we use outside of ourselves to help us remember things. Calendars, agenda books, our smartphones, timers, all kinds of different things, notepads, post-it notes, all of those kinds of things. These are far more effective than internal memory strategies if they're used properly. The key to using these is using them consistently. So it doesn't help you to write that item on your calendar if you then don't look at your calendar every morning to see what's happening in the day. Sure, you wrote it in there to help you remember, but if you're not making it a practice to look at it so that you can retrieve that information, it's not going to help you very much. If you're comfortable using something like a smartphone, these can be very helpful because it will actually give you pop-up reminders, or you can even put sounds to your reminders. So those can help you remember things as well. The key to using external memory strategy or a memory aid is that it's something that you're comfortable using. So it's something that you can make into your regular routine, can make it part of your practice, but it's also something that you are used to using, you're comfortable using. If you try to use something that you don't know how to use it and it's just causing you more frustration, then maybe it's not the right thing. So we say that smartphones are great, but if you're not comfortable using a smartphone, it might not be the best tool for you. You might be more successful using the pocket calendars or things like that. So it's whatever makes sense for you, but it's using it reliably. Here we have an example of an internal memory strategy, an acronym. This is from a program from Baycrest Health Sciences, which is down in Toronto, and their program is called Learning the Ropes for Living with MCI. And MCI stands for mild cognitive impairment, which is when somebody has memory changes that are beyond what you would expect with normal aging, but they don't meet the diagnostic criteria for dementia. So it's kind of a precursor to dementia, but not everybody with MCI will progress and be diagnosed with dementia. So this program here, the ROPES acronym, stand for the different parts of memory strategies. So we'll go through them. These are great strategies to help you with your memory. The first one is recording information. So we talked about earlier using more senses to help you encode information. And this is where recording it comes into play. When you record information, you're using more senses. You're using more complex processes. You're encoding the information at a deeper level. So this helps your brain remember. It helps encode it into the brain. It's important to document in one central location and keep information with you at all times. So this goes to the retrieval piece. So now you've recorded it. That does help to make the memory stick. But it also is an external memory strategy, a different external memory aid whatever you've used to record the information, but then it's using it consistently to help you retrieve that information when you need it. So if you don't keep it in one location and you can't find it, it's not going to help you. If you're at the doctor's office and you're recording information on your calendar, it's not going to help you if you're trying to figure out whether or not you had something planned for the day that the doctor wants to make an appointment. So that's why things like smartphones can be very helpful, because they're usually with you all the time. But it might be technology that not everybody is comfortable with. And so a lot of people use things like pocket calendars that they have with them all the time. So that can be very helpful. So it's not just at home with you, but if you're out at the doctor's office doing other appointments and so on, so that it's all there in one place. The O in ROPE stands for organize. So it's important to use different memory aids properly and to be organized. If you can't find the notes that you made, then they're not going to help you. So one thing is to record information in an organized manner and to keep that information in a place where you know it, always in the same location where you know that you can find it. So have a place for everything and everything in its place. You think about those things that we typically misplace, things like our keys and our reading glasses, medications, possibly. Those important items, if you have a place for them and they're always put back in that place, then you never have to go looking for them. They don't get misplaced. So being organized can be very helpful, but it has to work for you. So whatever strategies you put into place here, it has to be a place that makes sense for you and something that you can put into practice. But the key is practice. You think, well, I won't remember to put it back in that place all the time, but it is keep practicing until it becomes a consistent habit. The example here we have is the toothbrush. And chances are you never misplace your toothbrush unless you take your toothbrush out of its holder in the bathroom. So we don't misplace our toothbrush because you pick it out of its holder, you use it, and you put it back. But if you were to take that toothbrush and pack it in your suitcase because you're going on a trip and you don't put it back in its holder as soon as you return home, then you might find that you do misplace it. So it's a good example of if you have a place for an item and you take it out of its place to use it and you put it right back as soon as you're done, then you won't go searching around the house frustrated because you can't find it. So if there are items that you typically misplace, think about how you can find a location for them and make it part of your habit, part of your routine to always put that item back in its place as soon as you're finished. So the P in ROPE stands for practice, and practice is about practicing remembering over a spaced period of time. So the research shows that this can be very effective in helping us encode information. When you think again about when you first meet somebody and they tell you their name, and if you repeat that name back to them, then in conversations, if you keep trying to use their name often, it helps us to encode the information. And so we'll be more likely to remember their name again later than we would if we weren't repeating their name back to them. When I usually do Heads Up for Healthier Brains, and I do this series in person as a workshop, the first thing that we do in week 1 is to do introductions. And when I first meet somebody, my practice is to repeat their name back to them. So I'll say, well, it's very nice to meet you, Sue or John or whatever their name is. And then I'll keep using their name over and over in each session, so that as we go along, I don't need the name tag so much anymore. I'll remember what their name is. So practicing over that spaced period of time can be very effective in encoding information. The E in ROPES is for elaborate. And elaborate is making the information meaningful to you. And a few slides ago when we talked about helpful encoding strategies, we did talk about this, that making the information meaningful will help you encode it. So that's going to help get the memory in. And if you can get it in, it will be easier to pull it back out again. Because if it doesn't get in, it's like it didn't happen. So you can't retrieve it. So remember that the reason for making information meaningful is to process it at a deeper level. Okay, so we want to use more brain processing in order to encode the information. And the last letter here in ROPES is S for stop, see it, and say it. And this is one that I personally find very helpful. It is stop in the moment, pay attention. Focus your attention. So we talked about how important attention is in encoding information. Visualize what you want to do and say it out loud. Or if you don't feel comfortable saying it out loud, at least say it out in your head out loud. So things like I'm closing and unlocking the door. So how many people have driven away, gone on a trip and went, did I lock the door? Did I close the garage door? Did I turn off the stove? Did I do this? So all those kinds of things that we know later on we're going to be, did I do that? I can't remember, is making it part of a habit, and this takes practice, that when you do that action, say it is locking the door, that you are stopping and focusing your attention on locking the door. You are actually paying attention to what you're doing, and you're saying it out loud. I am locking the door, or I am turning off the burner, or I am closing the garage door. I know for me, one thing that I've learned to be a practice is when I go to a large parking lot, quite often, say I'm going grocery shopping, I would just not pay attention. I would park and I'd go do my shopping, and I'd come out and I'd have absolutely no idea where I had parked in the parking lot because I had not paid attention to where I was parking. So my brain said, well, that's not important. I don't need to hang on to this information. So now I've learned whenever I park in any parking lot to just take a quick moment to stop, pay attention to where it is that I'm parked, visualize what's around it, and even say into my head, okay, I'm parked in the second row beside the car corral or something like that. And then I always know exactly where I'm parked when I come back out again. Now that we've talked a little bit about memory strategies, it's time to get into the exercise portion of today's video. We're going to talk first about exercise for the brain, or cognitive engagement. When you think about activities that we do, and how do we know that an activity is cognitively engaging? That's actually giving our brain exercise. So the key with cognitive engagement is that it's giving our brains an opportunity to make more neural connections. In the last video, I talked about how the brain works and how the brain has the ability to make trillions of connections, and it's always making or losing connections all the time. And what we want to do is help our brain make more connections. The more connections it has, the more routes it has to go around damage that might occur from a disease like Alzheimer's disease. And it makes these connections through activities that are cognitively engaging. How do we know an activity is cognitively engaging? Well, if it requires your effort and focus and attention to do it, that's a good indicator. It is a new activity or one that you find challenging. So when we think about activities that we do, I happen to be a musician. I've been playing music my entire life. Music is actually a very cognitively engaging activity. It uses many different brain regions, a lot of different processing in order to listen to the music, read the music, play the music. So it's actually a very, say, all-around exercise for the brain. But because I've been playing since I was a kid, over time, it becomes more of a routine. I don't have to pay attention. I don't have to focus so much to play my instrument that I've been playing for close to 40 years. And so recently I had the opportunity to learn how to play a different instrument. And so I took that opportunity, and this is where, you see the two roads diverging in the woods. Sometimes it's easier to say, well, I haven't done that before, so I'm just going to keep doing what I've always done. But it's learning to take the other route and saying, you know what, I haven't done that before. So I need to take the opportunity to do this, because what that's going to do is help your brain make new neural connections. If I always played my flute, which is my main instrument, I'm paving this one road, and that's good. But it's not really giving me the new roads that I need happening in my brain. So by learning a different instrument, my brain is now going, oh, I haven't done this before. Something new to do, something new to learn. And so it's making new neural connections. So whenever you are able to take that path that's less traveled, take the route that you haven't gone before, try the activity that you haven't done before, even if it is just changing up something that you've always done to make it a bit different. Maybe it is learning a different musical instrument, learning a different dance routine, learning a different card game, doing something that you just haven't done over and over again. So this is giving yourself the permission, or maybe challenging yourself to take these opportunities whenever they come up. So it is getting your brain to learn something new and experience something new. It could be as easy as just, if you always walk one route every day, try a different route. It can be as simple as that. So that's really what we want to see with cognitive engagement, is doing something that's different. Because when your brain experiences something different, it's making new neural connections. And if you really want to focus on this, activities like learning a musical instrument is very good for cognitive engagement. Learning a different language, very good. Going back to school, lifelong learning, maybe it is just doing doing workshops like this. If it's new information that you didn't know before, your brain is making new neural connections. And there's lots of opportunities in our communities to do things that are new, to learn things that are new. You know, in my community, I'm here in Midland and Penetang, and there's great opportunities at our cultural center, the day in the life, to learn about a new person and a new experience, or opportunities at our local libraries. Have lots of different classes on many different topics. Join a book club, take some language classes, even just reading a different book on your own, whatever. All opportunities to work on cognitive engagement and make new neural connections, and that's really the key. So again, with the cognitive engagement, the reason why we want to do this is that it is building your cognitive reserve. And I did touch on that a little bit in the first video. The more connections our brain has, that's our cognitive reserve. So the more neural connections our brain has, the more routes it has to go around damage that might occur with a disease like Alzheimer's disease. So we want to build our cognitive reserve. We want to build more neural connections. So that's really why we want to engage in this cognitive activities. The cognitive engagement is so important. In the last video, I mentioned that we were taking a lot of our research from two different important research documents, and one of them is the Risk Reduction of Cognitive Decline in Dementia, the World Health Organization guidelines, the WHO guidelines, and this comes out of that document. And what they're saying is that cognitive reserve refers to the brain's ability to cope with or compensate with neuropathology or damage. And so things like Alzheimer's disease and vascular changes with vascular dementia, so the damage that's caused by those diseases, if the brain has a cognitive reserve, it's able to cope with, it's able to work around the damage. So that's what we've been talking about in the last few slides. So studies have shown that increased cognitive activity may stimulate or increase cognitive reserve and have a buffering effect against rapid cognitive decline, as well as a significant reduction in the risk of MCI, which is mild cognitive impairment, or AD, which is Alzheimer's disease diagnosis, and those who reported high compared with low levels of cognitive activities. So really, it's about taking the opportunity to participate in activities that are going to require your attention and focus, have you learning something new, experiencing something new. And looking at your community, and like I said, libraries are a great resource for opportunities to build your cognitive reserve, but there could be other organizations too in your community that can help you build your cognitive reserve. So look outward and see what's available for you and what you might be interested in, and take the challenge of helping to exercise the brain and build that cognitive reserve. We talked about the importance of exercising our brain, and now we're going to talk about the importance of exercising our body. So getting exercise is actually one of the best things that you can do for your brain. In the last video, we talked about our brain being approximately 3 pounds in weight. So if you're a 150-pound person, it's about 2% of your overall body mass. But our brain actually takes 20 to 25% of our blood flow. And the reason why is our brain requires so much oxygen and so much nutrients in order to keep all of those neurons working well, also to help the brain discard any of the metabolic kind of gunk of all the processing that it's been doing all day long. So it needs good blood flow to all parts of the brain in order to do this. And when we have problems with our vascular system, we start to have problems with how well our brain works, and we become at higher risk for diseases like Alzheimer's disease, and also things like vascular dementia, because that is very specifically tied to the health of our vascular system. Exercise is so important to keep our heart healthy and our heart pumping, so it's also very important for our brain. But there's also other benefits for exercise and our brain health as well. And here are some of those exercises. So again, it's good for the heart. So what's good for the heart is good for the brain. That's one of the biggest messages with brain health. What's good for the heart is good for the brain. Exercise also helps to lower chance of developing other chronic diseases. So all those heart diseases, hypertension, high cholesterol, and so on, but also diseases like type 2 diabetes. Exercise is important to reduce the risk for type 2 diabetes, but also if you're living with type 2 diabetes, exercise is an important part of the strategy to help manage that condition. So that's an important reason to exercise. Also, exercise helps to improve our balance. We know that head trauma at any point reduces or helps to increase the risk for dementia. So if we are improving our balance, that means that there could be less falls, less injury, and also reduce the risk for dementia because of reducing the risk for head trauma. Exercise helps us to sleep, and sleep is an important part of our brain health, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the 4th video. So that's important as well. And there's actual evidence to show that exercise can help grow the hippocampus, which is the memory center of the brain. So the more we exercise, the better our memory becomes. So lots of reasons to exercise. Exercise can also help us decrease our stress levels and reduce the risk of anxiety and depression and so on. And those are all things that increase the risk for dementia. So helping to reduce the risk of stress and helping to manage depression, that's also very important for our brain health. But as it says here too, we need to find, when we're talking about exercise, we need to find something that we enjoy doing, because if we're trying to put an exercise routine into our life and we're not enjoying it, we're not likely going to be successful at maintaining it. So that's really the key. So as we look at the research, and again, we're looking at the World Health Organization guidelines, and there are large observational studies with follow-up periods extending decades, and they do show that physically active people seem to be less likely of developing cognitive decline. And there's a number of other benefits here that they talk about, and things that we've already mentioned in this video about the effect of exercise on our heart health, the effect of exercise on reducing the risk for type 2 diabetes. So there's a lot of benefits for exercise. New this past fall was the 24-hour movement guidelines that came out, and these were developed in partnership with the Canadian Society of Exercise Physiology, Public Health Agency of Canada, Queen's University, and Participation. And the guidelines used to be that they recommended 150 active minutes a week, which is still great if you could do that, to get out and walk or go exercise or do whatever activity it is that you enjoy doing. And in fact, going out and say going to an exercise class can be a great way of not just getting the physical activity in, but also a great way of building the cognitive reserve, especially if it's something that is new to you, whether it's going to an aerobics class or going to play pickleball or doing whatever, whenever this pandemic's over and it's safe to do so, of course. But they realize that this isn't a possibility for everybody. And so the focus of the new guidelines is to really incorporate movement throughout the day. Just move more, reduce sedentary time. So get up and stretch, get up and walk a little bit, maybe walk up and down the stairs in your house, or just walk from room to room, or do something. It's just move more and try to sleep well. And in the 4th video, we'll talk more about sleep, and sleep is a really important part of brain health. And so these are the focuses of the new guidelines: move more, reduce sedentary time, and sleep well. So it is more about trying to integrate this into an everyday routine. And at the end of the day, you want to make it realistic for you. And for most people, in order to do something, we need to enjoy it. So think about if you're looking at physical activity and like cognitive activity as well, what is fun for you and what's realistic for you? Because if it's something you enjoy and something that you are able to do, you will be more likely to be successful at it, and more likely to be successful at it for the long term, for it to be sustainable and attainable. So think about in your life, what are your interests, what are your capabilities, what are your opportunities, and how can you incorporate that to build that cognitive reserve and the cognitive engagement and the physical activity, something that you can make part of your lifestyle, something that's going to be sustainable. And at the end of this video, we want to talk a little bit about head safety. In order to maintain brain function, we want to make sure that our head is safe. Head trauma at any point in life can increase the risk for dementia, so we do really want to keep that head protected. And if you need some research to support that, the importance of keeping your head protected, this is actually from the Lancet Commission in 2020 report of the Lancet Commission. The report's titled Dementia Prevention, Intervention and Care. And they were looking at traumatic brain injury. So what they found was traumatic brain injury increased 1 year dementia risk, and risk remained elevated over 30 years. So mild traumatic brain injury increased the risk of dementia less than severe traumatic brain injury, and multiple traumatic brain injuries increase the risk further. So the more severe the injury and more frequent injuries can increase the risk more so than just a single one, but there's always some increased risk when you have head trauma. So you really want to keep the head safe and protected. So when you think about how you can protect your head, well, of course, always wear a helmet, and wear a helmet properly. Oftentimes we see kids out there with their bike helmet hanging off their back of their head. So you have to make sure that it's on properly. When you have your helmet on, it should be fitted over your ears. The chin strap should be snug but not too tight. So make sure that it's sitting on the head correctly. Always make sure that you're wearing your seatbelt. I hope that that's a given. Fall hazards in your home. So there is a checklist, and there's a link here. The Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit also has a really good guide called Staying Independent of Falls Prevention Checklist. So if you're able to access that, and I'll see whether I can incorporate it underneath this YouTube video so that you can get that checklist. It's a great checklist. You go through every part of your home, and it looks for common fall hazards so that you can do your own assessment of your space and look at what fall hazards might be in your environment, and then you can address those fall hazards. So that helps reduce the risk for falls. Very important, especially as we age. So that's one of the biggest concerns with older adults, trying to decrease that fall risk. So we know that when somebody falls, the potential for injury is so much higher. And then we've come to the end of our second video in the Heads Up for Healthier Brains series. The third video is about food. So healthy diet, feed your body, and fuel your brain. So I do hope that you will join us for the third video in the series.